Hey there guys, Templar here, and today I'll be talking to you guys about the ancient Lombards. Now, you guys might hear, pretty much if you guys actually had watched my other episode of the Vindel period, well, this is technically a follow-up to that of the Vindel style era of the Lombards. Now, I can hear you guys already, Templar, who were the Lombards? I never heard of them in any Germanic history. Or any of that matter, any form of history at all. Well, that's the thing. The Vindel period pretty much provides more information on the Lombards. And pretty much the Lombards were a type of, I guess I might say Germanic tribe, but a lot of people might even say Scandinavian. It technically, in retrospect, the books state that it's from during the time of the Roman Empire. If it was any group that was west or any type, or should I say, any group that was east or north of the Rhine, or even the Danube, technically it's stated that they would be labeled as Germanic people, though that did not actually get that many information due to the tribal people that lived here in history. Now, even though the Lombards are of a Germanic origin, we still do not know that much origins of them. A lot of people say they're from Germany, Germanic regions, or some people even say they're from Scandinavia. Now, the migration route does, and I know it does explain a lot, but that's the thing. The migration route is a migration route. We really don't know of which region they became from. So we're just going to label them as Germanic people. Now, as I can already hear you guys already, Templar, how does this actually cope with the type of forms in history? How do this actually does keep on our mass amounts of the form of history of their arms and armor? And where did they come from? Well, that's the thing. The Lombards actually came, as I stated, from the Germanic regions, and later on settled in the lands of Italy. Pretty much this land they fought over, and doing so conquered it from the Byzantine people, so you could see where they got their empire from. But now, it's even stated that the Lombards were pretty much of an early metal type equipped armor group. In other words, they rode in on heavy cavalry, and as well, whenever they had foot soldiers, they still had enough, well, armor to technically be unstoppable. But now, let's take a little bit of a look at their armor first, before we get to their weaponry. Now, even Skallagrim has actually had one of his videos about a armless type of a type of Lombard soldier who lost his hand, but later on replaced it for a type of use of pretty much using a type of small knife. So I'll have to put a video in there for you guys down in the description below, along with several types of armor and weapons they would have used that pretty much you guys can buy if you guys want to. Now, I can already hear you guys, Templar, what were their weapons? What were their armor? Just tell me now. Well, that's the thing. The Lombards actually had pretty impressive armor. Now, as I stated, their armor was pretty much mostly metal. Now, yes, I hear you guys already metal. Anyways, their armor, yes, was metal. But, as well, it was also leather and cloth. Now, of its original type of armor, we do not know that much on the clothing. But technically it is stated the clothing was type of an Eastern gambeson-like fashion. In other words, it was a doublet over a tunic. In other words, you would wear your normal tunic and such, and you would wear this doublet, which would be like around 2 to 3 layers of, well, wool and cotton. Doing so, you just pretty much overplace it over to the chest, and next thing you know, it's pretty much already a good armor. In other words, think of Kingdom Come Deliverance with the Cumans, for example. Yeah, that type of tunic. But yes, this doublet pretty much worked in providing good, ample protection, especially from sword blows. But later on, they had to evolve more different types of armor. Now, these types of armor would actually vary from time to time. It just depended on how rich you were. Now, if you were a poor class soldier, you had what you might call leather laminar. Now, laminar, as I stated before, laminar is good armor, even in leather form, but I'm not big of the leather fan. Now, as doing so, this leather would overlap itself, in doing so, creating the laminar function. Now, technically, you had to hunt a lot in order to get this type of, well, armor. But other than that type of lightweight armor, they would also use what you call a deer palta, or in the Lombard terms, a durama clock, as they would pronounce it. In doing so, it's nothing more than a deer skin. Now, this deer skin would have been sewn together, and in doing so, the internal end of the pelt, such as like if you skin a deer, for example, and leave the pelt out to dry and such, in doing so, the fur end would pretty much be in the inside, which would be pretty much actually pretty warm, but as well would also add a lot of form of protection to that doublet. So, this would be worn over the doublet. Now, we don't know how many of these were made since it is this, well, deer skin. Though as well, the most great, I've even heard that even the most bravest of warriors actually charged a boar or a bear just to get these pelts. That's right, charge. In other words, they would use a spear and actually use an ambush tactic to kill an animal. The man who have killed that animal would later on claim the pelt and turn it into armor. Now that sounds really cool, I know, but it kind of sounds a little crazy. Well, crazy or not, it can actually be explained. For example, boar spears were technically used to hunt boars, so yeah. That's one big example. In fact, this was lightweight armor back then, so this is during the Vindel period. In other words, the Lost Information Archive. But now, let's also take a look at their other type of armor, their metal armor. Now, the Lombards didn't use that much mail, actually. In fact, of what form of mail they would have used would have actually been a vintail. Now, a vintail is what actually comes onto a helmet when it's, well, pretty much on the back end of the helmet. That's in case to protect your neck if you don't have a neck guard. Now, this is another cool thing about the Lombards, which I extremely like about them. It actually stated they would have actually used mostly either scale or laminar armor when it came to plate. Even their helmets were made of scale or laminar. Now, this is what they would do if it was scale armor. Let's start with the helmets. When it comes to the scale armor would have actually been pretty much, they would take in cloth or any type of pelt, maybe, or form of leather, as a lining, for example. Then they would put on the scales. In other words, like you see in Kingdom Come Deliverance. Yes, I'm referring to the video game a lot, but technically that's because it actually makes sense. In fact, that's pretty much the only type of place I can actually show you, well, technically you guys who play video games, for example. Pretty much that's a big example for it. Now, this helmet actually did provide ample support for the head, but if you got hit by a mace or a warhammer, you're technically going to get killed. Or as well if you get shot by a crossbow or a bow and arrow. But here's the thing, the only type of weapons that were used at this point in time during this Vindel period were either swords, axes, or small maces. Now, the maces were, back then, were a little different compared to what we think of a mace. In fact, it was just a shaft and a metal head. That's it. But now that's the thing. If you even got hit by an axe, you would actually get your head split in, even though the scales would have actually stopped the blow entirely, not enough that technically it would have gone in. Most of the blow would have gone right into your skull, for example. Like, say if I'm wearing one of those scale helmets. Here's the thing. I have it like wrapped around, but in doing so, if he hits me, say, in the head, I also need to wear padding underneath that, so I do take most of the blow, like the scales take most of the blow off. But if it's a heavy-duty weapon like an axe or, as I stated, a mace, what it would do is break my integral parts of my skull, even though it stops the cut. Now, that's also another thing. I could probably die later on, but still, it did provide me more of a chance of surviving. But now, if you got shot by a crossbow or a bow and arrow, you're technically dead in the skull. Even though the scales did stop it. But now that brings me to my other armor. The scale armor of the chest area. Now, this scale chest armor was pretty cool because they just used, as I stated, deer skin or something like that, and pretty much just placed on the scales. The scales overlapped them, each one of each other, and in doing so can stop the, well, bolt or including a arrow from going through. The only thing is, if you stab upward, the scales won't work. Yes, that's actually the problem with scale armor. That was the only problem. If you stabbed upward in the scale armor, what would happen is it could easily get into your skin, or as well in the process kill you. So, yeah, there was the problem there. Still though, this was pretty good lightweight armor. And if you were technically get shot by, say, army of archers, for example, you technically look like a pincushion. Even though, and yet you would still survive, yet at the same time, you still look a little stupid. Though, here's the thing though, this scale armor was not the best. Reason why? It wasn't, that well held on together. Not as much as laminar, which is probably one of my favorite of early plate armor. Reason? It overlaps itself, yes, the same way, but not the same way at the same time. It still overlaps each other, but this time sideways. In doing so, each one of it overlaps each other, making it impossible for even a thrust to get in there. Even if you thrust it to the side where the openings mainly are, it will just, well, have the blade get stuck. And if you're on the battlefield, you've technically broken your blade if you try thrusting in that region. This was actually the really cool part about laminar. Laminar, you can actually develop it even more over time, and in fact, the Lombards were known to have shoulder guards, they had a chest guard, pretty much the chest protection, and including thigh protection. What they couldn't protect on their forearms and their knees, or including their shins, they made up for with vambraces. Now, vambraces were both used on the arms and legs, though these were more of a elongated sheet of metal, for example, that would technically be, well, tied to the hand or the leg. In doing so, it kind of looks pretty well, but the only thing is, with the problem with these, say you got, say, a thrust to an opening. Now, normally there would never be an opening in these, but there is a slight sliver of an opening. The sliver of an opening is mainly due to it being, say I take, like, say, a leather arm guard, for example, like for archery. What I would then do is just place these metal strips along the arm guard, and in doing so, it pretty much protects my entire forearm. Now, I can hear you guys already, but wait, if it protected his hand, then why is it so vulnerable? Well, that opening in his sheets. That was the only problem. In doing so, you can easily stab right into it. Now, as well, there was scale versions of that could stop it, but not when, as I stated before. So that's why it was given up. But the cool part about these laminar style arm guards and vambraces was that they protected the body. In fact, they looked like a medieval tank, or early version of a medieval knight anyways, but not as quite. Because, as I stated before, knighthood didn't begin until later on. But pretty much, the Lombards were extremely cool for their arms and armor. Now, the weapons they were named after, but as well, they pretty much got their main name from their armor. Lombarda Raclot. In other words, laminar. So in other words, pretty much, this was a laminar military group. And they kept this armor up until the time they copied off of the Normans, in which they still didn't copy off the full Normans fully up until the late medieval age. And by the time of the late medieval age, they adopted plate armor a little bit more, which you gotta give them credit for that. Now, let's go back to their helmets. The laminar helmet, for example. Now, this was actually the cool thing. What would actually done, they would actually attach each laminar strap up and up until it pretty much reached about yay high, give or take. And pretty much, yes, it was all the metal plates were all held together by leather. That's it. That's all it was. Just small leather strips, or sometimes just woven cloth strips. This was impressive even back then. And even the Romans or Byzantines feared these guys for a reason. Because it stated that even though their archers didn't make a dent on them, even their charging cavalry, who tried their best to charge even a spear into them, failed. This was actually probably the most impressive thing in history, because the Lombards were pretty much a strong, hardcore group. No wonder they took Italy back from the Byzantines. In fact, pretty much the only reason they stopped fighting pretty much other kingdoms was technically because they became Christianized a little bit more. The only reason they actually saw the idealism of controlling, well, the region of Italy is kind of clear, really. Italy was the pride to the Byzantine Empire, meaning if we take Italy, then we technically kicked Rome in the ass. So, pretty much, yeah. Still though, this was pretty impressive even to today's standards. If you could actually armor up this soldier well enough, they could still take on a massive blow. Now, I can already hear you guys already, but wait, what would the normal foot soldier be armed with? Well, that's actually a good question. Now, the Lombards were known to actually have cavalry, but as well infantry. This type of infantry group actually did have many weapons, such as a spear, which elongated spear, which technically would be like 1.5 times their size. In other words, it measured up their normal size, but then half of their size in the process. Now, as well, they would also have a shield, and including some forms of armor. Those that couldn't afford much armor pretty much fought just in their regular doublet guard. Now I hear you already, Temple, it doesn't sound like a good idea. Well, that's what we thought about the Gambison, but technically it's a good armor as well. Now, this is also the cool part about this armor. Even if the foot soldier was technically out pretty much in the open, he would actually have a type of shield. This shield was very, very impressive. Now, I hear you guys already, oh, this is going to be a Viking shield type. It's going to have a lock shield type. Not exactly. It may look like a Viking shield, but unlike a Viking shield, this shield protruded forward. Meaning that, say like I'm holding the boss here, and if an archery ring came down, what would happen is the arrows would glance off to the side due to the angle. Same with the spear or an axe, it would just glance off. It would not work on the shield itself. The shield would hold against a weapon, which is the cool part. Now, I can actually put a video guide for you guys down below for weapons that made Britain in which they'll cover the shield. You'll know which one I'm talking about when you see the shield protrude forward. This shield is pretty much one of the most impressive shields the Lombards used, but was later on replaced by something else. We do not know what it might have been though, but it does actually state much more in history about them. But now we are informed also of their weaponry. Now, the weapons that the Lombards would have used would have actually, as I stated, a spear, but as well with these shields. Now, also though, when it came to the cavalry didn't use shields. They just charged in with a massive lance-like spear. Doing so skewering, well, anyone that came right in their place. But now let's get back to their weapons. Now, normally their weapons were the average sword, or if they couldn't afford it, would be a sax. Now, a sax, if you guys don't realize, is actually a knife. Now, the sax is technically, the longest type of one goes up to 29 inches. And that says blade length, ladies and gentlemen. So, yeah. But the Lombards, they managed to create those long saxes about yay big. Now, I don't know if you guys don't realize, but this is the blade length. Added in with a handle. I don't even know if I can get it in the camera angle. But yeah, that's pretty big. So in other words, I got a good weapon that's a single-edged weapon, and that if I lose my spear, I can go right to my sax. In fact, the Lombards were the creators of a new Iron Age in Europe. And in doing so, they kind of created the first, well, militarized group that could actually fight off against any group in history. But now, what were their swords like? Their swords were extremely impressive, even to today's standards. The reason why, it had this incredible, well, design. And now, it had this little small lug on there. Now, this lug was not meant for decoration. Well, both meant for decoration and not decoration, because it would hold a strap that would be attached to your arm, or your wrist anyways. Doing so, if I lost my sword, I can easily grab it back again. So, yeah, the Lombards were pretty impressive with their arms and armor. Problem is, though, there weren't that many of historical finds. What we could find, though, is left to date. Now, I can already hear you guys already, but Templar, what other arms and armor did they use? Well, that's the thing. Due to the Victorian idealism, most of this information is lost to history, or as well, even including with the so-called World War I and World War II. Now, upon those two wars, Italy kind of lost its Lombard culture. In other words, such as the tomb of Agrin Akka. Agrin Akka was actually a great king of the, well, Lombards. Though he was buried in the far northern region of Italy, and in the process, well, during World War II, his tomb got bombed accidentally. Which, you can't blame the other side for that. Technically, it was kind of by accident, so they mistaken it for a military structure. I don't know how, which still leaves many to answer that. But still, though, the Italians actually even state that many forms of Lombard arms and armor can still be found in Italy. Though in Rome itself, it's actually stated that most of the arms and armor were later on turned into different forms of armor. But as I stated, most of the weapons changed over time, especially with the Normans coming in. They only fundamentally changed into different types of armor by the time they reached the plate by the late era. In other words, by the time when the Crusades come around. But by that point in time, actually, it's even stated that they would have actually taken their grandfather's armor, like literally, this would have been passed down from generation to generation, laminar, scale and such, and converted into different types of armor. Still though, this is really impressive. They returned it as, well, loose armor into fully articulated plate. Still though, I wish they kept a lot of that old ones because it would have been a lot more badass. I mean, look at this shit. This looks awesome as hell. Anyways, guys, if you guys want me to talk about any culture and history that was of the Vendel period, let me know down in the comments below. I can actually easily look this stuff up for you guys if you guys want me to. Also, any other type of warrior cultures in history, also let me know in the comments below. And pretty much if you guys also want me to talk about anything else in history, also let me know in the comments below as well. Anyways, also subscribe, click that bell icon, and like this video for more. Anyways, guys, have a good day.